It wasn't the pain from my open wounds, nor the loss of my children that kept me awake during the dark nights. It was something deeper, something more unsettling: God's silence. Imagine yourself shouting your questions into the sky, only to be met with a deafening emptiness in return. One single question consumed me entirely, burning inside more fiercely than any suffering I had ever lived through. Where did God come from? Who was he before time, before stars, before everything we call creation? Even before light shattered the darkness, where was he hidden? And if no one created him, then how could he simply exist? If you've ever felt this same unrest, this forbidden question that many are too afraid to even think, then stay with me, because maybe together we can finally reach the untouchable. Maybe you felt this question too during a quiet moment of despair or a silent crisis of faith. Maybe you've buried that question, afraid it might sound like blasphemy, because since childhood, we've been taught that God is eternal. He always was, he is, and he always will be. But few have the courage to really explore what that means. Try to imagine something that never began. Try to picture someone who exists without origin. The mind trembles, the spirit shakes, and your heart stumbles. I wasn't just looking for cold logic. I was searching for something deeper: comfort. I needed to know if this God, who seemed so distant, was really in control from the very beginning of time, or if my faith was just a well-told story to calm my fear. My question didn't come from arrogance or disbelief. It came from the broken heart of someone who lost everything, yet still refused to stop believing. Because if God truly always existed, if he never needed to be created, why does it feel like chaos is louder than his presence? I felt small, crushed by questions too, big for words. But something inside me insisted that God wasn't offended by my weakness, that his eternity wasn't shaken by my human doubts. Maybe that's why you're here too, tired of easy answers and ready to go deeper, searching for truth strong, enough to silence even your deepest fears. There was a time when my faith was as solid as the stones that lined my fields. I didn't need proof because peace was obvious. Prosperity surrounded me like a shield, and God's hand seemed visible in every detail of my life. People called me righteous, blameless, blessed, but none of those words survived the first blow of the unexpected. What was firm turned to ash, and when the dust of mourning finally settled, I realized that the questions I had never needed to ask were now sitting beside me, looking me in the eyes, waiting for answers. What I thought was unshakable was being hollowed out from the inside, not by doubt, but by emptiness. And in the middle of that emptiness, the question no one dares to say out loud was born: who created God? For countless nights I went over everything I had ever heard about him, the Alpha and the Omega, the one who is, who was, and who is to come, the I Am. But reciting phrases doesn't calm a soul in agony, because when suffering touches your soul with its cold hands, memorized theology feels fragile. I began to realize that knowing things about God is not the same as knowing him. And in that deep pit of pain, where religion didn't embrace me and friends judged me, I was honest. For the first time, I looked up to the sky and asked, if you created everything, then who created you? That question didn't come to destroy my faith. It came to test whether my faith had roots. Many would say that this kind of question is a philosophical trap, that trying to understand the origin of God is like trying to pour the ocean into a cup. But I wasn't looking for logic, I was looking for presence, because a God who exists outside of time should be able to reach me inside my pain. And if he is eternal, then he is also present. And if he is present, why did he seem so absent? These were the questions that burned in my spirit. I didn't want to deconstruct the Creator. I wanted to find him again. I wanted to know if he truly was there before anything else, or if he was just a convenient idea passed down from generations. And maybe you know what it feels like to be in that place. Maybe you're here not because you doubt, but because you're tired of believing without feeling. Because there's a kind of faith that survives without answers, but there's also a real hunger to understand where everything begins, and whether that beginning is worthy of your trust. And if that's, you know this, you're not alone. Because if even righteous Job faced this kind of doubt, then doubt isn't rebellion. It's the sign of a seeker, and every sincere seeker has a destination. But the answer wouldn't come the way I expected. It wouldn't be a voice that explained timelines or gave me formulas. It would be something greater, deeper, and more unsettling, because sometimes when you ask about God's origin, what he does is show you the origin of all things. And in that process, you realize that the real problem isn't not understanding, it's not trusting. And that trust, not blind but mature, is what turns chaos into solid ground. If you still haven't found the answer your soul is looking for, stay with me, because in the next few minutes, you'll hear what I heard. Not a theory, but a confrontation. Not a definition, but a revelation. And after that, nothing was ever the same. You imagine that when you cry out to God with all your heart, heaven will answer immediately, with thunder or tenderness, with voice or wind. But what do you do when heaven stays silent? Not out of indifference, but for a reason you don't yet understand. That was the sound that surrounded me after my question. There was no anger, no light, no sign, only the echo of my own despair. Divine silence is an uncomfortable space. It makes our fears louder, our theories heavier, our attempts to fill the emptiness with human logic more desperate. It was in that silence that I realized, sometimes God doesn't speak because he's about to show. As the world around me seemed to collapse, as friends pulled away and pain visited like it belonged there, my spirit became more aware. At first I thought God's silence was punishment. Later I understood it was an invitation to listen with my eyes, to see with my spirit. His silence didn't mean absence, it was preparation, like the pause between thunder and rain, short, dense, full of promise. But this kind of waiting only holds if your soul has roots deeper than fear. Eternity for us is almost an unbearable idea. We live in time, tied to clocks, dates, beginnings and ends. We are shaped by cycles, by causes and effects. That's why our logic insists that everything must have started at some point. But in the space between my cry and his answer, a new question rose inside me. What if God doesn't fit into our questions? What if our questions are just attempts to reach what can only be revealed, never explained? That's when I understood. God's silence wasn't the end of the conversation. It was the beginning of a revelation. Science tries to understand the universe by asking what came first: time, matter, energy. But if everything has a beginning, where is the beginning of the beginning? And what if there is no beginning for the one who holds the very idea of beginning? If time was created, then the creator exists outside of it. And if he is outside of time, then he has no before. He simply is. Just like we don't ask where the number 3 came from, or who invented the idea of justice, maybe we shouldn't ask where God came from, but what he is saying by existing without a beginning. That's when I saw something clearly. While I was waiting for an explanation, God was preparing an experience, not a theory, a presence. He didn't answer me with an argument. He revealed himself with a truth that was beyond words. And in that moment, all the silence made sense. Because the God who never began also never ends. And if he has no end, then neither does his faithfulness. His promises don't expire. His love doesn't fade. The silence wasn't abandonment, it was reverence. Because some answers can only be heard when everything outside of you becomes quiet. If you've ever felt like God was silent while you were screaming, know this: he may have been closer than ever. Because the God who created sound also created silence, and both speak. The difference is in who listens. And now, if you're ready, I'll tell you what he said when he finally spoke. It was as if time had stopped, as if the air around me had become heavier. I didn't hear a voice from heaven or see signs in flames, but something inside me opened, as if my spirit was finally clean enough to carry the weight of the answer. And then it came, not as a conclusion, but as a presence, not as a reasoning, but as a certainty. In that moment I understood what Moses heard in the desert: I am who I am. There is no origin for the one who is the origin itself. He doesn't explain himself because he is the explanation. The words that came to my mind weren't human. They were like light breaking through the cracks of a shattered soul. And the answer was clear. God didn't come from anywhere because there is no place before him. He didn't begin because beginnings depend on him. He wasn't created because everything that is created exists through. I remember an image that crossed my mind in that moment. If you try to measure the ocean with a spoon, the problem isn't the ocean, it's the limitation of the tool. Our mind is like that spoon. Small, useful, but limited. We try to fit God into logic, but logic is something he himself created. Just like time, matter, and gravity, he cannot be defined by what he designed. So asking who created God is a question built on a lower logic, trying to reach a higher being. And God, with love, gives us something even greater in return: peace. That was the peace that filled my heart. As Paul wrote to the Colossians, all things were created by him and for him, and in him everything holds together. That truth brought me back to spiritual clarity. It wasn't necessary to understand everything in order to trust. In fact, trying to understand too much could even become a barrier, because faith is born in that space between honest doubt and total surrender. God doesn't need to justify his eternity to be trustworthy. He is trustworthy because his eternity sustains everything that exists, including my life, including yours. In that moment, I realized that what felt like absence was actually reverence. God didn't reveal himself right away because he was teaching me to wait, to grow, to quiet all the outside voices until I could hear the only one that truly matters. And that voice, when it speaks, doesn't just answer the question, it answers your whole soul. God told me without saying it, I didn't come from anywhere. I am the place everything comes from. That is the answer no science can give, and every soul longs to hear. It's the answer that doesn't fit in logic, but fits perfectly in the heart. And maybe you're at that same point now, caught between the need to understand and the urgent need to trust. If so, I want you to know, the answer you're searching for may not come as an explanation, but as a presence, one that surrounds you, calms you, and shows you that God isn't distant or indifferent. He's simply beyond. And that's exactly why he is worthy of all your trust. There is something about eternity that frightens us, not because it's threatening, but because it's too big to be controlled. And everything humans can't control, they try to deny. That's why the idea of a God with no beginning is uncomfortable. If he has no origin, we can't place him in time. And if we can't place him, we feel like we can't get close to him. But the truth is the opposite. It's exactly because he has no beginning that he can be present in every moment. It's his eternity that allows him to be here. Right now, Isaiah said that God dwells in eternity, but also with the broken and contrite in heart. This means he's not far away, hidden in some unreachable corner of the universe. He is in eternity and in the tear, in infinite time and in the exact moment when you thought no one was listening. God's eternity isn't an abstract idea, it's practical comfort, because if he's beyond time, then his mercy doesn't wear out with the days. If he never began, then his love can't be interrupted. Everything we know has a start and an end, but he simply is. Modern physics suggests that time, space, and matter are inseparable. One cannot exist without the other. That's fascinating because the very first verse in the Bible already taught this. In the beginning, time, God created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. That interdependence is not a coincidence. It's a signature. It's the trace of a creator who not only invented these dimensions but exists above them. Just like an artist isn't trapped in the canvas, God isn't limited by creation. He transcends it, sustains it, and at the same time fills it with grace. This understanding changes everything. It changes how we see God, how we see pain, how we see time. When we understand that he is never late because he doesn't work on our schedule, we can rest. When we understand that he wasn't created, we realize our faith is not built on myth, but on a logical necessity. Everything that exists needs a cause, but there can't be an endless chain of causes. At some point, there must be a starting point that was not started by anything else. That starting point is God, and he chose to reveal himself not in a lab, but on a cross, not in a thesis, but in a person. In Christ, the eternal stepped into time. The unlimited became flesh. John wrote that the Word, who was with God and was God, became flesh and lived among us. That changes everything because now eternity has a face, and it's a face that cried, bled, and overcame death. When you ask where God came from, maybe the most beautiful answer is, he came to meet you. That's why eternity can fit inside a heart. Not because we understand everything, but because we were reached by someone who understands everything. And he's calling you to trust, not to control, to rest, not to figure everything out. Because eternity is not an equation, it's a place, and that place has room for you. And now that you know this, maybe you're ready for what comes next. Because there's a decision to be made, and it starts with one simple step of faith. For a long time, I thought faith was a kind of answer, something that filled in the gaps of what I didn't understand, like glue between the pieces of broken logic. But it wasn't. Faith isn't a replacement for reason. It's the light that allows us to keep walking when reason can no longer guide us. When I finally realized that I wouldn't get all the explanations I hoped for, and that God didn't owe me any justification, something changed inside me. I began to see faith as a daily choice, not a final conclusion. The same faith that moved Abraham to leave without knowing where he was going. The same faith that led Moses to face Pharaoh with nothing but a staff in his hand and a promise in his heart. The Bible is full of stories where faith didn't come after the explanation, but before it. As if God was saying, trust first and then I'll show you. The writer of Hebrews said that faith is the assurance of what we hope for and the conviction of what we do not see. That means believing is not escaping reality, it's seeing a deeper reality, one that our natural eyes haven't yet reached. And maybe that's why so many people get lost trying to fully understand God before trusting him. But trust is the actual path to knowing him. At this point in the journey, I realized that my question about the origin of God wasn't wrong, it was human. But my need to receive a logical answer was in part an attempt to control the uncontrollable. God didn't reject my doubt. He invited me to walk through it. And the more I walked by faith, the more I understood that the answer my heart was searching for wasn't an argument. It was a presence, the same presence that sustained Elijah in the desert, that comforted David in his Psalms, that protected Daniel among the lions. A presence that doesn't need to be explained to be real. Faith also changes our priorities. When we trust God even without understanding, we begin to value His character more than His ways. That's what Job discovered, not through the arguments his friends gave him, but in the moment when God finally spoke to him and didn't explain everything. God simply revealed His glory. And Job, upon seeing it, said, "Before, I had only heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." He didn't receive a manual, he received a vision, and that was enough to turn pain into reverence. This is the exchange that faith offers us. It doesn't remove every question, but it puts each one in its proper place. Faith allows us to move forward even when everything around us seems frozen. It teaches us that we don't need to understand to obey or see to follow, and when we take that step, something happens. Our soul finds rest. The kind of rest Jesus promised to the weary and burdened. A rest that doesn't depend on answers but on relationship. And maybe now you realize that you don't have to carry the weight of doubt alone anymore, because there's a place where your questions can rest, and that place is at the feet of a God who is eternal yet came close. And when faith replaces the need for answers, you're finally ready to hear a call, not to explanation, but to surrender. Maybe if you've made it this far, something inside you has already changed. And not because you found all the answers, but because you discovered that there is a God who listens, even when all you can do is cry in silence. This is the most precious kind of reunion, not with a doctrine, but with the source of life. The faith that was born in the middle of doubt now beats like an invitation. Come back. Come back to talking with God like you're speaking to a friend. Come back to hearing His voice without needing everything to make sense. Come back to trusting. Even if you're still surrounded by questions, no matter how far you've gone, God has never stopped being your starting point. And He never stopped being your destination. He is like the father in the parable who saw his son returning from a distance and ran to meet him. He didn't wait for explanations or ask for proof. He just opened his arms. That's the God who responds even when you've stopped asking. And when you understand that He didn't come from anywhere because He is the way itself, something inside you realigns. You realize you were never truly lost. You were just trying to find your way without looking at the north. But finding God again is not just about believing again. It's about learning how to live again, waking up with purpose, facing the day with peace, loving people with a kind of love you can't explain, but you know where it comes from. That's what the Spirit of God does. He rearranges everything inside, and that transformation doesn't end here. It's just beginning. Because now that you know who God is, eternal, unchanging, without origin yet full of grace, you need to meet the one He left to walk with you every single day, His living presence, the Holy Spirit. This next step may be even more powerful, because it shows not only who God is, but who He wants to be inside of you. Many forget Him. They live as if He were a distant wind, a vague force. But He is real, personal, present. He is the answer to the emptiness that even good answers can't fill. He is the gentle voice in the chaos. And if now you feel ready to go deeper, to stop looking for explanations and start carrying His presence, there's something you need to hear. Maybe you haven't noticed, but He's already calling, waiting, ready to fill you with purpose and direction. And the best way to continue this journey is to hear what He Himself has to say. The answer won't come through theory. It will come through presence, a presence that transforms, that restores, that teaches you how to breathe again. And that's why, now that you understand who God is, the time has come to meet the one who walks beside you. Because the question is no longer where did He come from, but how far can He take me? And the answer is waiting for you. If after all this, what you feel is a sigh of relief, it's because your soul has recognized the voice of its Creator. Even without all the answers, even without fully understanding the infinite, something inside you knows you're coming home. And this return doesn't have to happen all at once. In fact, it never does. God works step by step, day by day. And He left a simple, gentle, presence-filled path. 30 steps, 30 days. A real, intimate, personal reunion. So if you're feeling that call, don't ignore it. What feels like just a question may actually be your spirit crying for help. If there's a deep emptiness inside you, a distance from God that you can't explain, then this may be the step that changes everything. The devotional Your 30 Steps from God was created exactly for those who are tired of feeling far and need a real, intimate, possible path. It's not just another book, it's a 30-day reunion that will guide your soul back, even if you don't know where to begin. Thousands have already been transformed by these pages. Now it's your turn. The link is pinned in the first comment. It's a deep journey, and yes, there is a cost, but no price compares to what it can give back to your life. And now that you know who God is, eternal, unshakable, without origin, the time has come to meet the one He left to walk with you. You need to watch the next video. It's already showing up on your screen. Click it. Don't wait. It's more than just a video. It's a reunion with the presence of the Holy Spirit, and maybe it's in that video that you'll finally feel like you'll never walk alone again.